We have 3 items on the agenda for tonight that are all related to planning and development. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather Ireland to start with the introduction of items, the first one being construction fencing. Heather, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike. This one I'm going to be pretty brief on. You guys have the information as part of the memo, but back in June, the CRA expressed some interest in construction fencing in the downtown area. So we have a few things going on, a few projects right now. And one of the CRA members provided some information that he got from some research that he went ahead and did, which is in your packet. He met with both me, Public Works, and the building official, and we basically all had the same answer. Was we didn't really have anything in our current codes or policies that required or regulated construction fencing, and that it would be something that would require a change to the land development code. So I've provided to you guys the actual section 34406 for fencing that's in our land development code, and the additional attachment is one of the research items that the CRA member provided to us. So since this would require a change to the land development code, we are looking for direction from council on your interest in something like this. We don't have anything really specific to go towards except the question of if you guys consider this a priority or not to develop some regulations or requirements for construction standards, and if so, where would that be? So again, we're really looking for direction from you guys on this, and I'm obviously happy to answer any questions you have on the CRA's discussion on this topic.
So the first hand up is Council Member Meza, followed by Councillor Jansen.
Heather, I kind of agree with the CRA. I know the fence that's in place right now in front of City Hall and the one next to the to our building, it's a pretty nice fence. They have a green sheet over it, but I think this is something that we could do. I think this is a good idea. I know the company that's building the hotel next door, they fired a company from Orlando from the prior fencing they had. It was kept falling down, kept breaking, and it was taking weeks for them to get it repaired. So they got a local company to do the fence, and they have 24-hour service. So oh, and I don't know if you guys noticed the fence by Ruby Beach. It had the Back to the Future car. If you guys didn't see it, I thought that was pretty cool. And I keep it's not on there anymore, but that was pretty neat. And I think maybe having some paintings or pictures of what it's going to be to cover the construction side would be a good idea. That's it.
Councillor Jansen, followed by Vice Mayor Nichols.
So it's been my professional experience over the years. I've worked many construction and industrial accidents and incidents in my term with the sheriff's office, that most of that is handled and regulated by OSHA. They'll if you're going to dig a pit, or if you're going to put in fuel tanks, if you're going to have any kind of hazardous material, things like that, OSHA regulates that. They're going to require them to have some kind of fencing on that. And I feel that sometimes I'm a big fan of smaller government, so I don't want to get too much in an overreach and what we should be regulating and what we shouldn't be regulating. I don't mind it for commercial use in our CRA. I'd probably go along with that to a certain degree, but I don't think we should dive into the minutia of whether fencing is required or not, because that's already being done for the most part. I mean, it would be more of an aesthetic thing, I think, if we're requiring it, beyond what's required by OSHA standards or construction company standards.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Nichols, by Councillor Dumont.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to maintain. I think it's imperative that we have the opaque covering of the fence on the construction sites in the downtown business district. They can do some pretty creative things on those, but I think it is something that if we don't require it, we need to have it and we need to make sure they maintain it. But looking at the lot across from me, they've done a pretty good job with the fencing that they have, but they don't want people in the construction site anyway. So it's a good safety measure to have. But I mean, I don't think it needs to you don't necessarily have to have it for residential. I think for commercial areas that we should have it.
Thank you. Councillor Dumont, followed by Councillor Golding.
I agree. I could see asking or requiring this. What would happen? We would be requiring businesses to expend a cost to make their fences look pretty. And yeah, we've seen some pretty fences. The original fence with the covering of what's right behind the band shell. That was really nice. It gave us an idea what was there, and I kind of like that. But that is an expense that we're then adding on to the developer versus just putting up a fence, or as our code currently has it, not having to put up a fence at all. I'm agreeable to putting up a fence and having some, I really do like the visual, so people can anticipate what is coming to that area. They can visualize it. They can kind of see it in that field, but only in the downtown area. I don't see a need for that in a neighborhood. I don't need to know what the house next door, if they were to ever knock it down, what the new one would be, what the new one would look like with my little place on the side. I have no need for that on the fence, but I think that it helps businesses downtown because it markets the business, the business that's going to be coming, but it also markets the area to future businesses that may be thinking about purchasing or renting in that area, to give them a better idea. That said, I would love for the CRA to be able to help ameliorate the cost of the netting on the fences with the picture of what the future business would be in some kind of a grant or something like that. So we're not pushing the cost fully onto a developer to add to an already heightened cost for doing anything in our downtown area.
Thank you. Councillor Golding, followed by Vice Mayor Nichols.
So having listened to the CRA meetings and followed what the CRA's train of thought on this, they have been saying for quite some time, and so has Mr. Marsh, that we want our downtown area to be like Disney World. They want it to look great, be kept up, and be an area that is very appealing for people to come to. So I can understand that this is why they are interested in adding some regulations with regard to the fencing. I like Ms. Dumont's idea about the CRA helping with the cost to, provide some kind of visual. And I also agree that I would support it in the downtown area, mainly because of the focus that we have on the downtown and how we're wanting to make the downtown a more appealing area. And I certainly have seen how terrible some of the construction fencing has looked in the past. And, that's definitely, for anybody who lives in the downtown area or anybody who visits the downtown area, that's not giving a very good, a good presence, I guess, is what I would say. But I would support it. And then the other thing I think would be important would be to include something about, because I think one of the cities that was included in the research had some information about how fencing needed to be handled if there's like a hurricane. That's something that, I know we've gotten citizens who have expressed concern about construction sites and how construction sites are being handled when there's a storm approaching. So I'd be supportive of including something to give them some guidance on what we would want them to do with regard to fencing if there is a storm approaching.
Vice Mayor Nichols.
I guess my only other comments are, well, two things. If you get into a piece of property like Dolphin Depot that goes unconstructed for a long time and has it up, you got to make sure they maintain it. But could we potentially get into an issue in conflict with our sign ordinance if they do a wrap that looks more like an advertisement for all kinds of stuff? Could that potentially be in conflict with our sign ordinance?
It's safe to say any ordinance that we would draft or propose changes to regarding the fencing and what could go on the fencing would be reviewed by our attorney before we put it in front of you.
Okay. I mean, I don't have a problem with it being pretty or being something about it. I just don't think we need, them to go out and sell ads on a decorative fence or anything. So
it comes down to that definition of signage versus art. And obviously we would want the attorney to look at it from the perspective of signage to make sure that whatever is put on decorative fencing is compliant with our sign ordinance so that it doesn't jeopardize the integrity of the ordinance itself. And Mayor Hoffman.
Thank you. For me, to answer the question, is this a priority? It wouldn't be a priority for me personally. I think the overall question, though, that's being asked is just the aesthetic and the look and feel of our downtown. And I think that we already have in place enforcement mechanisms if fences are in disrepair, that we should already be enforcing that. We should be making sure that construction sites and vacant lots are kept to a certain standard. So I feel like there's probably a few steps that we should be ensuring that we're doing 100% of the time before we add this on. I also think that maybe we could just, as we're talking to developers and building plans are being submitted, that maybe we suggest this or offer this as an opportunity that they would voluntarily do it. I just can't imagine changing our land development code for something like this, where I think there's a lot of steps that I think we can hit before this that would make maybe even more and a more immediate improvement to our aesthetic and our landscape downtown.
Councillor Dumont, followed by Councillor Stokes.
Thank you. How I read the ordinances, we currently don't have anything, so we can't make them do squat. So we'd need to be able to amend the LDC to have them put up a fence and do things such as that. And I think while we're there, we might as well make it look pretty. I understand the argument as to whether it's a priority or not, but I just think that right now we're at the tipping point for our downtown area, and any development and future development should be able to visually note to the casual observer, because before you invest in any area, you're going to go through the area to just look around. And if you see fencing, just regular chain link 6-foot fences or 8-foot fences, versus seeing the image of what's going to be there in the future, or just an empty lot and overgrown weeds, I just think that that's going to be far more appealing to somebody who will invest in property or a business downtown than what they are currently looking at. That's kind of how I'm viewing it from a developer or a business perspective. We do have codes for the weeds and all of that stuff that the mayor mentioned, but we don't have the code for the fence. If the fence is falling down and such, yes, but that it needs to have a fence, and the fence should, I guess, look good as an aesthetic. so it falls into the gray area when it comes to the need for the requirement for the fence and then what the fence should look like.
Councillor Stokes?
If I'm not mistaken, commercial properties that are under construction are required to have fencing outside of our local thing. I think it's either an OSHA, like Councilmember Jansen said, or something as well. I think this is more requiring standards. I'm with Councilmember Jansen and the mayor that I don't feel it's a huge need and a huge a thing to expend more, government reach on fencing standards. It's already a requirement, but if we do go down the road, I would suggest something along the lines of a combination of Boca and Coral Gables. I like the way that those are kind of written. So, I don't really want to go down that road, but I like those two roads because it's, it says it may be placed on the property lines, and it does say all zoning districts, which is an interesting little twist. I know we're talking about the CRA, but one of the questions is, do we expand beyond that? And then I like that if we do it, that it shall be covered with a visual dust barrier. So I think a good combo of those two, but I do like the point of, if we're going to require it in the downtown CRA, that we should be pitching in as well, because I don't like creating an undue burden on the developer who is already trying to spend a lot of money in our downtown. I think it's an additional cost that it's just, we could be, I think it's a good aesthetic, but it's kind of an undue burden on the developer who's already spending a lot of money. So if we do something in the CRA, I think it was Councilmember Dumont who made the suggestion of having the CRA pitch in.
Councillor Jansen?
Yeah, to your point, Councilmember Dumont, if we did that, if we regulated that and it was only in the downtown central business district or the CRA, if you have commercial properties along Beach Boulevard or just outside that CRA area, then you're back to the chain link fence that's 6 feet tall and it's unregulated. So it's either got to be kind of citywide with commercial properties, or then it becomes a moot point, because if you're only doing it in the CRA or the central business district, no, great, it looks good in that one little area, but that's not the only main corridors, if you will, through Jacksonville Beach that could still see regular construction fencing, which I'm pretty confident that fencing is guided by OSHA. And a lot of construction companies, a couple of people that I talked to said that they're very keen on putting that up for various reasons. One, they don't like to have the property traversed by individuals when construction is going on. Also for theft prevention and a myriad of other reasons that they put on their own accord, that they put the fencing up.
Councillor Dumont?
Thank you. Heather, is this an OSHA regulation?
I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on OSHA. It's something that I'd have to research.
'Cause I can understand an OSHA regulation if there's a ditch, big old hole in the ground, but we're at the beach, can't have a basement. So yeah, there are rocks and things that a person can hurt themselves on, and we all know the burglars breaking into a house or falling through a skylight and they win the suit. But I'm not sure where OSHA would stop and where a business like insurance would pick up. So there's two things. There's the OSHA making you do things, and then there's what your insurance company will make you do, things that far exceed what OSHA is asking for. So there might be a little bit more clarity needed in that realm. That said, I'm still looking at the downtown as a marketing area, and I don't see it to be an onerous burden on a developer if, and only if, the CRA is willing to fund the, let's say a fence is needed, fund the wrap on the fence to say that, you know, this is what's going to be coming here. So pay for that level of printing to make sure that it's more than just aesthetics. It's marketing, it's PR, it's getting people excited about what is coming to our downtown. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get people excited and engaged about our downtown area. And chain link fences don't do it. Wraps do. They start the conversation. People start talking about what they saw. They think that's cool. They can't wait. Or, you know, they're always going to have comments. There'll always be negative comments. But, you know, it helps to get the conversation going and the excitement building as to why others should want to start looking at investing or opening businesses in our downtown area.
Councillor Golding?
I'd like to just add that I realize there probably is an OSHA requirement, and I believe that the intent of the CRA is to take this beyond the OSHA requirement. Maybe Mr. Gilmore could add some additional information, or Ms. Ireland, either one. But the discussions I've heard have all been about aesthetics. And I don't believe OSHA regulates aesthetics. I think OSHA just strictly regulates, you know, this, you know, you need to have a fence to protect this area, right? And to keep people safe and that sort of thing. So my understanding is the intent is to improve the aesthetics of the downtown area. And that if that's the case, and if Mr. Gilmore or Ms. Ireland would like to expand on that any, I can certainly see that it'd be advantageous for us to look at doing something. It doesn't have to be extreme by any means, but something to give the CRA some tools that they can use to help with the look of the downtown.
Mr. Gilmore, I see you've taken the mute off.
I was just going to concur with Councilor Golding's statement. The CRA discussion about it has been about aesthetics and safety, certainly, but aesthetics as well. That's what they wanted to have explored. That's what I came and believe from the statements, especially from CRA member Paytow, who's the one that brought this up and was talking about it. And there again was consensus from the CRA that it be brought to you for discussion.
Councillor Stokes?
Wrong one. Just so we're all on the same page, I did Google it real quick. OSHA does have fence requirements for construction fencing. It's pretty broad, to Councilmember Golding's point, but it is commercial construction property is required to have a fence. And I agree this is about aesthetics, but I go back to Councilmember Dumont's great idea that if we're going to require something above and beyond what is required, that the CRA should be willing to pitch in and you know, pay for part of it. I think that's you know, I think that's pretty fair to both sides. If we want to put, you know, more regulation out there, then let's help them and pitch in. And it's not going to be a huge cost, and to everybody who's made a point about it, it will look a lot better. So I think that's a good compromise in my opinion.
Mayor Hoffman?
So instead of, again, I'm hesitant to put this into our land development code, but would this be something that could fit into our incentive toolbox so that we are actually offering an opportunity for a new business or a business that's remodeling or whatever downtown to get funding from the CRA on their own free will? They're voluntarily entering into this for all the reasons that we've said. They want their construction site to look good too. They want to advertise what's coming in. And instead of going through the land development code process, we go through the incentive toolbox process that our CRA is supposed to be working on now as we speak. Hopefully, ideally. Is that a possibility?
That's an excellent idea. Yes.
Great. Can we be done talking about fences?
About what? Okay.
Councilmember Dumont?
I agree with the mayor. I just hope that any business in the CBD is going to grab onto this because it really does, it helps them and it helps the city as well, and the whole area, the CRA and the downtown area and the city as a whole, to ensure that they will want to grab onto it. We should make the application process as easy as possible for them. So when the CRA is looking at how to devise the incentive for this, they have to, you know, they should be able to have priced out how many colors per square footage, the square footage of the fence, the wrap, how big the wrap's going to be. And this is the amount the grant will provide the developer, which should cover the cost of the wrap, not the fence, but just the wrap. And so there's a little bit of homework going on there, but this way the developers just have to go to the planning department and say, our fencing is X amount of square footage. This is what we're asking for. And that will be the check or the grant that is awarded to the developer to easily pay for the wrap that's going to go up around the property.
Is there a consensus that we make this a CRA business incentive, make it a simple process, cover the cost of the wrap, and allow the business the opportunity to put some type of an image or graphic on the exterior that promotes what they're going to be doing? I see thumbs up and some heads nodding. And Councilor Dumont, we will make it as simple as possible.
Oh, of course. My question ends up being, is this a line item budget wise that has to go back through council to have X amount of dollars appropriated to wraps through the CRA?
My guess is, and Jim or Heather can chime in, but we would be developing this, the procedure and the template in concert with the rest of the incentives that the CRA is currently working on finalizing. And that whatever the incentive pot is, it may be broken into some subpots, or it may be one large pot of money that can be drawn from for a multitude of benefits to provide to the business owners.
But that pot of money hasn't been approved yet. Well, it hasn't been approved. We just approved, or we're almost double approving the doing the second reading on the 2021-22 fiscal year budget, which this isn't in that budget. So will we have a line item like mid-year that's the adjustment, or will we have to immediately address this beforehand to ensure that the CRA has the budgeted amount to be able to cover the cost of the wraps for any businesses who are doing development downtown? I guess that is a little bit more complicated than easy peasy, isn't it?
It's, Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but as we bring forward a pool of incentives to be utilized by the CRA, there will likely be a pot of money that needs to be approved to go along with that. Because if we try to say, what is the dollar amount that we're going to put in just for wraps, we'd first have to make an estimate of how many businesses we think are going to go through a renovation project during the course of the year, or through a demolition and rebuild, and create an estimate of what's needed. My guess is it will likely be a six-figure pot of money that can be used for not just wraps, but other incentives for the businesses as well. And that would all likely have to come back to council for approval of creating that pot of money. Go ahead, Jim.
My question.
We're actually working now on those incentive, hopefully easy applications and what those formats will be. And we're going to be discussing that with the CRA in the next month or so. We've, Ms. Ireland and I and Taylor Mobbs and Taylor Mahia have been working on that even last week, talking about the formats, including what the percentage participation should be from the private owner to the public owner, and it's all what you're talking about wraps perfectly into, no pun intended, for wraps for the incentive toolbox that we're working on.
I think the pun was intended. You've been working on it. All right, so two quick little follow-ups. So therefore, if this were to get passed before the mid-year budget adjustment, the CRA can spend beyond what their budget is for us to be able to okay it on the back end, correct? So let's say the CRA in their meeting on Wednesday says, yeah, we're totally into this, and this is how much we want to allocate to this. Before we get to our mid-year adjustment, because we haven't even started the next year, they will be able to kind of like deficit spend because they have enough in their pot.
We'll double check with CFO Gossett, but my understanding is if we get approval from council to do this, we would deficit spend until we do the mid-year budget mod to do the true up.
And
So
the city won't let us deficit spend any more than what's in the pot.
Correct. You'd be giving approval prior to the mid-year budget mod, and then at the mid-year budget mod would be the true up, similar to what we do here. So the answer to your question is yes, we'd be able to expend funds before we get to the mid-year budget mod.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you. I know it's a little bit more complicated.
Mike, it's the Mike.
Vice Mayor Nichols.
Mike, it's the different. We're looking at the differential between the cost of a plain dust screen, which is already required, and the cost of the dust screen with the with whatever printing on it that we want to do. We're not going to pay for all of it, right?
We'll have to take a look at what the OSHA code currently calls for. You know, as I sit here and look out my window right now, there is construction fencing at the Beaches Town Center that's currently under construction. There currently is no screening or dust control on that fence. So clearly there are some areas where the dust control may be required and some areas where it is not. I think our intention is to try and incentivize the developer to make sure that there is an opaque screen and that the opaque screen provides a benefit for the visual of what the person sees when they're walking or driving past it. So we'll have to figure out what that differential is, whether or not the screen's mandated or there is no screen mandated, and we want the full wrap to go up, not just a decorative wrap.
Okay.
I think we've actually gotten to a consensus on that one. Heather, you good on that one? Jim, you good on that one?
I think so. And again, you know, like Jim said, we're working on the different incentive packages right now. One of them we've discussed is just kind of a overall beautification. So if I would consider this to fall in that category of facade improvements, landscaping, painting, etc. Obviously, we have to make sure what the CRA can and can't pay for. So that's research that we'll do on this topic as we build out those different incentive programs.
Okay. Heather, I think you're clear to go to item 2.
Refresh myself on what is item 2. All right, here we go.
CRA expansion.
Trying to find my memo here. Okay, so back when you guys met in July, end of July, to talk about CRA objectives and priorities, one of the things that came up was the possibility of investigating expanding the downtown CRA boundaries. So it kind of was left there. There wasn't much further discussion on where exactly to expand the boundaries. You know, we did meet with our consultants with Southern Group to talk about, you know, what that process would entail. Obviously, the findings of necessity is the first step in this process to determine, is the area that you're looking to add, does it fall into the Florida statute 163, which I've given you a copy of, so you can see what the state considers a blighted area from the CRA's perspective. And we've got obviously Mr. Gilmore here to answer any detailed questions about the findings of necessity process, but we're looking to get your feedback on if this is a priority for you, for staff to spend time and resources on, and if so, what would the boundaries potentially look like for that area?
Councillor Jansen?
Yeah, so since that last meeting, the one thing that I did do was I drove down 4th Street from Beach Boulevard all the way to Fletcher Middle. And I think I counted roughly about 15 businesses that would be affected, that would fall into that boundary if we set the boundary on the east side of 4th Street. I didn't go any further south than Beach Boulevard, but I'm in favor for the expansion. I just don't know that we meet the requirements that are laid out here.
Mayor Hoffman, followed by Councillor Dumont.
Well, since I was the one who brought it up, I didn't want to not speak, but when I look at the list of requirements, I can say I can make an argument for quite a few of them. And I would actually want to go further than 4th, but I think that overall for me, it was just the fact that 3rd Street is like a river going down the middle of what I would consider our downtown. And I think if we can provide some continuity and to bring this side of 3rd Street up to the level in infrastructure, for one thing, we have some terrible drainage problems over here. There's a lot of unpaved street parking that I don't even know if it's really parking, but it just looks really shabby. And for that to be alongside of our community redevelopment agency just doesn't make sense to me. So I personally would like to see us go a little further, maybe even to 6th Street. And if you really look at what is included there, there's actually a lot of property that would not be a tax benefit at all. I think there's 4 churches in that area. There's the Beaches Museum, there's Players by the Sea. So there's a lot of tax exempt property already. So it wouldn't necessarily be I have no idea what the valuation would be, but we also, and I've mentioned this before, have a tremendous amount of our more historic and older buildings that are in really crazy size lots and are, at threat of destruction because we can't really get creative where they are. And one of them is that big pink building where that old tattoo place used to be. There's the A1A Lock and Key, there's Caffeinated Cat. There's all sorts of little tiny businesses over here that I think would really be able to benefit from being brought under the CRA umbrella.
Councillor Dumont.
I don't disagree with the mayor that there are a lot of buildings and businesses that could benefit from it, but then why wouldn't you go south of Beach? So you have the Rhoda Martin African-American, it's like with the oldest African-American school at the beach. Why would you just be looking north instead of also looking south? Based on the criteria just given, Ginger's would be a historic building and business. I'm not sure if, because of specifically the cost of renting any square footage of property at the beach right now is so high, if it would pass the blighted test. Because it's not like the prices are lower, comparatively speaking, in that area versus south of Jack's Beach and such. The real estate's at a prime right now at the beach. I'm kind of tossed on this, and I appreciate also Mayor Hoffman's nod towards historic buildings. That is very important. But then who decides what a historic building is and who decides what a historic building is not, considering we don't have a historic preservation at the beaches type organization, and they're not state or specifically nationally noted as historic buildings. They're just, old buildings. The house I was brought up in it was built in 1900, so it's over 100 years old, and there's no way I would consider that a historic building. So it's all relative to how one wants to look at the area. If there's an analysis done and the analysis shows that we have a strong argument to be made for why we should expand the CRA, fine. But I personally don't see it, specifically because property values, regardless of what is on that property, noting specifically that there are no historical properties designated off of the museum property, that I think, it couldn't be sold and because it doesn't have that historic designation, sold and turned into that is a multifamily residential property, turned into townhouses. There is the lot, if anything, is worth far more than the building.
Mayor Hoffman.
I would just want to backtrack a little bit. If I used the word historic, that was in error. I should have used the word older. So shame on me, because I certainly work in this line of conversation on a daily basis. But we do have many older homes, or most of them are homes that have been turned into businesses. And if I'm not mistaken, we could utilize the CRA to incentivize and give people the ability to keep older buildings that we can justify keeping. I don't have the details on that, just throwing that out there as one of the benefits. I wouldn't be opposed to looking on the other side of Beach Boulevard. However, the conditions over on that side are much better. Probably, I would suspect, having to do with the fact that there's a lot of city-owned property over there. The streets are in much better condition. So that's, I'd be all for including the Rhoda Martin Center and obviously the historic Gingers. But in terms of the greater need and where I would look around and just drive around and say, this is not what, downtown Jacksonville Beach should look like. It's on the north end of Beach. So or the north side of Beach. So that's why I would focus on that area, because I think it's an area that we could make a pretty immediate, dramatic improvement. I guess I'll also add, the question is, and I think in Georgette's comments, she said that she would want to see what the consultants found out. What would it cost look like to do this type of work to even see if we can make an argument?
Don't know. We haven't asked for a scope of services yet, because we don't know if we were talking about one block west of A1A or going all the way down Beach Boulevard. Obviously, there's a lot of information that needs to be looked at, and the larger the area, the more effort that's going to take. So that's why we're looking for some direction from council to see if this is a priority for us to be doing right now. If council says yes, then the question becomes, what does that boundary look like for analysis? Clearly, if there are some areas that you target or you include that are areas that have been redeveloped with good infrastructure and a solid development pattern, that may actually detract from your analysis. If your area is small and compact and tends to hit more of the markers that are in that list, then there's a higher probability of success. But we won't know until council tells us, A, that you want to do this, and B, what the boundary for consideration would look like. Vice Mayor Nichols?
Yeah, I guess my question refers to if it's an expansion of the existing downtown CRA as opposed to a new CRA area, they'll be getting benefit from the businesses that have continued to put money into the TIF funding based off of the, I guess, tax increment that's increased over the years since the CRA has been in existence. So I guess my concern is we would open it up and then all of a sudden build put a lot of money into that side, or I don't know. I just wasn't sure how that worked. If you could just expand it to that extent.
I'll turn it over to Jim to see if you've got any experience with modified CRA boundaries and how that works from the taxing authority perspective.
I will talk, well, multiple questions there. First off, you can indeed expand the boundaries. And if you're going to bring another area into it, it's much easier to do that than to establish a new and separate CRA. The expansion, again, must be examined to make sure you're getting maximum impact. But it is true that when that is brought into the area, the tax base is frozen at the time that you bring into it. So there may not be any really incremental increase in tax increment financing from the expanded area. And you would be looking at the funding that's in the current CRA to help pay for the cost of correcting the blighting condition in the expanded area. And that is an important point. I think as it relates to the finding of necessity, remember, you only have to meet 2 of those criteria, but I would agree with Mayor Hoffman that likely more than 2 would be hit to make it work. But then the critical part is doing the plan. If we determine that it is blighted and you want to add it, then we have to have a redevelopment plan and a redevelopment plan amendment that identifies what has to be done and what we're going to do to solve those problems. And that likely would involve using some of the money that's being generated in the TIF by adding that boundary area into it. And that's part of the key. If you look at a whole new CRA and try to create a new one, aside from the technical legal difficulties of even doing that anymore, you're starting again at ground zero in terms of the tax base and being dependent upon increased development if you know it's going to occur. So if you're going to add it into it, it's would be assuming finding of necessity works and we have a redevelopment plan that can be amended to accomplish what we want to do over there. It's nice to know that we have a lot of funds that are being generated in the current downtown CRA that can go to solve those problems. Hope that's helpful.
Councillor Dumont.
I just wanted to tell Mr. Nichols that was an excellent question. Thank you.
Councilmember Jansen.
I just want to say that I'm in favor of looking into it. I guess my question would be what the boundary would be. That's more of the exploratory that I want to look a little bit further into. Councilmember Dumont brings up some great points about the south side of Beach Boulevard that I didn't travel. So I could see us going a little bit south on Beach Boulevard, but not a great distance. But I'm in favor for at least exploring it.
Councillor Stokes, followed by Councillor Dumont.
I've been looking at the map, and I think if we are going to explore it, I would like to consider going down Beach Boulevard, possibly to 9th. It includes the Beach Bowl property, which if you talk about older and relevant buildings that are going to, that one's already going to be redeveloped, but that one, the Sonic, that includes the Sonic building. And then you could go, if you went over even to like First Avenue South, there's quite a bit of, I think you could make a case for the blighted elements over there. I think that's where I got bit by a dog. So it's definitely more of the, what I think would fit the requirements. But I would like for, north and south, if we're going to do it, north and south is fine. And I would consider going down Beach towards 9th. I think once you get to 9th, it starts to improve some of the blighted conditions, but there's a little strip center right there between 8th and 9th that could use some work, and a few other areas.
Chet, are you including Cheddar in your analysis?
Yeah, I was thinking Cheddar and then maybe even to like First Avenue South, maybe those first 2 blocks. And then I think to the mayor's point, I think she was considering like the First and Second Avenue on the north side to include the Players and by the sea and some of those other buildings. So I think you could do like 1 or 2 blocks on each side of Beach to 9th would be my consideration.
Councillor Dumont, followed by Councillor Meza.
Okay, so if we are going to vote on this, I could agree with this, but it has to be able to encapsulate the Rhoda Martin Cultural Heritage Center, just because that really is a critical part. And that is north of 4th Avenue South, west of 4th Street. So I could see this like us drawing a line, kind of like our district lines are. At least mine kind of zigzags all around the south end. Sometimes it's up by 13th, other times it's way down south. So that would need to be included. I could see including Cheddar Ave because of the historic nature of Cheddar Ave. First Avenue also has a historic nature to it. However, that's also a lot of public housing. And so there isn't much to be able to do there outside of Jacksonville's aspect. That said, you know, if we wanted to, if you want to look at trying to improve the infrastructure of Jack's Beach, I would encapsulate all of San Pablo South, which is that area, into a CRA to ensure that they have drainage and sidewalks and all of the stuff that so many other CRAs are able to enjoy, but they are not, and they haven't been able to because that never came out of the general fund, which is what would have to come out of that for that area. It is an area that has a lower property value than the rest of the city, so it helps to tick off that aspect. I can agree with the 9th Street demarcation and Beach Boulevard for Chet's thing. I would go deeper south though. So I would also include things like, where's the, I lost the church. It would include the Carver Center. Oh, help me out here. The church, AME Church, it's on 5th, 4th.
St. Andrew.
St. Andrew, it's not coming up in my Google map. I got Second Missionary, First Missionary, St. Andrew. I would encapsulate that as well, because if we want to look at an institution that is near and dear to the history in Jacksonville Beach, that would be part of it as well. It's not just 3rd Street and Beach Boulevard. There's a lot of culture and history going on in the African-American community within our beaches.
Councillor Meza.
I can agree looking into this and expanding the CRA, especially how Chet explained it right to, Beach Bowl. And we had the Pablo sign that says, "Welcome to Pablo Beach." That one probably needs some love, so I can agree with everyone's point right now.
I'd like to see this drawn up so we can kind of move it around to make sure we're all in agreement. I don't know how we'd be able to vote on this today.
I don't think you wouldn't be voting on this today. This is just to get some direction from you. But what it sounds like is this is something that you want to explore. There seems to be some ideas of moving the boundary at least 1 block west of A1A, bringing it down Beach Boulevard, and then you've had some caveats both north and south of Beach Boulevard. Is there a consensus from council that we work something up and then bring it back to a formal council meeting for a vote with a graphic? See a few heads nodding and a couple others not moving at all. So I see yes. Okay.
I've got a yes. My screen's frozen, so I can't.
Heather, do
My
you
head-
think you have enough information to take a shot at a boundary?
Me and Sandy's hand and my hand's up, and Chet's hand's still up. I don't know if he wants to.
I wanted to
Sorry, I
hear
couldn't see.
from as to whether or not she thinks she heard enough information to at least take a stab at a boundary.
I think so. Like Councilwoman Dumont said, it'll have zigzagged lines as you described, kind of capturing some of these properties that you guys have mentioned. You know, one of my concerns from staff's perspective with getting started with something like this is that the CRA has somewhat of a backlog of projects that we're trying to get caught up on. In addition to wanting to fast track projects that are in our future year CIPs, trying to do stuff instead of in 5 years, but in 2 years. So we've got a lot on our plate right now. And thankfully we've got Southern Group on board to help us move all of these things forward. But just from a staff resource perspective, that would be my one concern, would be really when we could actually get moving forward with something like this, considering all the things that are currently on staff's plate that we're moving forward with. But I do think we have enough information to start looking at what some possible boundaries could be.
Councillor Golding?
Yeah, so Heather, Heather touched on a concern that I have. And, you know, I'm willing to be extremely open-minded, but my concern is that, you know, we want the CRA to do some pretty miraculous things with our downtown area and try to get our downtown area to where it needs to be. And you know, I don't know if anybody has seen it, but there's a video that's on YouTube. And Mr. Gilmore is in that video, and I think the video is probably from the 80s when the CRA was first started. And a lot of the things that were being said in that video then are still being said now. And I think we can easily say that, you know, there was, I went back and maybe I'll share that link with Mike and he can share it with everybody if you haven't seen it, but it just felt like we haven't gotten very far. I mean, I realize we got a lot of stuff underground. There's a lot of stuff underground that's been done, and there's a lot of value to that, to the infrastructure piece and to sharing the love and improving the infrastructure in other areas too. My only hesitation is in taking the focus off of the downtown and not getting where we need to go with the downtown. And so I don't want that to happen. And so yeah, I'm willing to be open-minded, but it does concern me a little bit that we're going to start spreading our CRA kind of thin.
Councillor Dumont, followed by Mayor Hoffman.
Thank you. I appreciate that concern, but I'm not sure how much the CRA board needs to be involved in figuring out how much it's going to cost for an estimate on what we're looking at possibly doing. Mr. Gilmore now has like kind of broad outlines of where we're looking at. And I think you'd get I think you'd be able to incorporate the larger cost of per block into a cost of how much it would be to be able to, or at least an estimate as to how much it would be if we chose to move forward and look at a true analysis of incorporating these areas that have been discussed into extending the CRA. So I'm not as concerned about that part. The CRA board is what we are concerned about, and I think that they should still be focused on the direction that we gave them over the last month. And I think that this falls outside of their purview. This is us asking a consultant, how much would you charge us to look deeper into this? It has nothing to do with the CRA board. I could be mistaken. It could be that the CRA board is the one that needs to give you direction and they're going to figure out which road and which turns to take on all of those things. But I see this as two separate entities. Once it's decided that we should go out and look at expanding the CRA, and it gets expanded, then the CRA board gets involved in managing the monies and the direction of the new CRA boundaries.
Mayor Hoffman, followed by Vice Mayor Nichols.
I just wanted to say I agree with that. I would like the next step to be for Jim's group to provide a preliminary review. I don't think that any of us are nearly as skilled at figuring out where these lines should be drawn as he certainly is. But I do, and if the recommendation is that this does not make sense for our city at this time, I'm fine with that. There's nothing on this list that I would fall on my sword for, but I do think it's worth looking into. I will say though, the description of a CRA that includes St. Andrew, AME, Carver Center, et cetera, is not what I would consider an expansion of the downtown CRA. That is what I would consider a new CRA. That would be a South Pablo Beach neighborhood CRA. So I will say, with adding all of that, that almost sounded like an attempt to overload it and kill it, because I think there's a lot of well-maintained streets and sidewalks and things over there. So that's one that gives me pause, that I think that might be the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of the size and scope of this. So to me, it would be, if we were to expand the downtown CRA, what would make sense to have these contiguous areas, whether it's north and south of Beach Boulevard, I don't know, but I'm not an expert in this. But also, people talk all the time about having supportive parking and things like that on this side of 3rd Street. So if we're going to potentially, years to come, do things that we're going to support our downtown with, then that should be part of the CRA. So I think there's some more homework to be done. I wouldn't hope that this would take up a ton of staff time, but that we can enlist our very skilled and experienced consultant to make some recommendations to us before we decide if we're going to go further, and before we draw the lines. I don't think that that's, I have my ideas about that, but I certainly am no expert in this area.
Vice Mayor Nichols.
Obviously, y'all know I've been very involved with the CRA over the last, 6.5, 7 years at this point in time, but I'm not a fan of hearing staff does not have the availability. We have funds in this downtown business district, and we need to invest. We can piggyback on other contracts. Let's go get the best consultants in the state that have transformed areas in 2 or 3 years. I mean, we're at this 30 years, and it is frustrating and disappointing. Let's go get the people that know how to do it. We can piggyback on other contracts in St. Pete, anywhere else, to get these consultants in. So Heather and our CRA administrator has the support they need. They shouldn't have to be trying to figure this out. We should be able to go get the best people that have already proven success in this process, because once we invest to get this stuff going, the value of the properties go up. We're going to generate infinitely more tax revenue by getting this done quickly than taking forever to do it. So I don't think the additional cost of bringing in consultants in order to move our CRA forward finally we're going to recoup all of that expenditure with the increase in future tax revenue.
Mayor Hoffman.
Last thing, and then I'm done. The original urgency for me of looking into this was that if we are going to give up funds on the south end, that we have an ability to negotiate at that point. So I don't think we should, if we have the opportunity to do a little bit of a trade out on CRA funding versus expanding a district, I think we need to be prepared to do that.
Vice Mayor Nichols, followed by Councillor Dumont.
I'm done. I'll take my hand down.
Councillor Dumont.
I can see Mayor Hoffman's strategic move here, but then we have to decide what is the value of each individual neighborhood that we're looking at expanding into.
I'm not seeing any other hands. Heather and Jim, do you guys think you have enough direction to put an item together for future council consideration? I'm seeing heads nod. Okay. I think that moves us into item 3.
Is it me again, really?
And this one's the hot topic.
Okay, I know. Okay, so back on August 9th, we discussed with you at a previous briefing some changes to the outdoor seating regulations in the Land Development Code, specifically increasing the ratio of allowable outdoor seating, whether or not to include outdoor seating into the calculations to qualify for a 4 COP special restaurant license, which the code currently does not allow. Potentially looking at increasing the area for bars, but maybe at a future date. Looking at providing some, we say the word free outdoor seating in terms of not having to go, for some establishments, not having to go through the conditional use approval process, which does, take some time. And so what we are looking for, and I know my memo is pretty lengthy, I was trying to capture a summary of the discussion from August and also address some of the concerns that you guys had with rhinos, parking, noise and use compatibility concerns. Also, if any loopholes would be created by making some changes to the code. And so I'm looking for direction from you guys at this point in time with actually beginning to look at amending the Land Development Code to these specifications that we've previously discussed. Maybe in some more specific details, such as what is the ratio we're looking at, and do we want to look at some, free outdoor seating for certain establishments, and what amount that would be. Happy to kind of talk about that in some more detail, answer questions you guys have. But again, looking for direction on proceeding with some amendments to the Land Development Code, and what that process would entail, as you guys know, would be, putting together an application and an ordinance, taking it to the Planning Commission first, since that the changes to the Land Development Code start with them, and then it would come before you guys for 2 readings. So looking for direction from you guys at this time to move forward.
First up, Councillor Meza.
Heather, I appreciate you putting this together. It's very well put together, and I appreciate your second bullet, by the way. So that's just a comment that I have, and I think that is all for me on this. But yeah, good job on this. I agree with it. Thank you.
I'm seeing no other hands raised. Does that mean council's good with everything that Heather has proposed? Vice Mayor Nichols.
Almost missed that. I am still interested in looking at reducing the seating for the SRX, the 4 COP, like we did in downtown. Jacksonville is done. I believe Riverside, Avondale. I'd like to continue to pursue that option so we can have small locally owned restaurants that can compete with these large seating restaurants. Anything that we can do to help small locally owned businesses, and I think everything else looks fine. Thank you, Heather.
And Heather, I think the only thing you were looking for some guidance from council on was on number 4 of your suggestion at the bottom. Amend the outdoor ratio from 25% to somewhere between 50 and 100%. So you'd be looking for some, I guess in theory, if we had some guidance coming out of this, great. And if not, we could take a guess in terms of final percentage to put in there. And council could always amend when an item would be brought in front of them. Councilmember Stokes?
Thanks, Mike. You caught the point that I was just about to make, is that was what Heather was, I thought Heather would be looking for guidance on. I like, I'm overall, I would love to see us get to 75, 100%. I think first steps, we should go to 50. And like you said, we can always amend. But I worry about, you know, I would love to see us one day be at 100% where you could have a full rooftop bar directly on top, or even rooftop, not, I want to say not bar, but seating directly on top of your building, and have the whole top patio similar to, what is it, Black Sheep over in 5 Points? If I'm not, is it 5 Points, Avondale? Chris knows I'm not good with my geography.
5.
Yeah, so I would love to get to that 100% one day, but I think going to 50% as a start is a good start. That already doubles it. So let's not go and, like, you know, do like 100% or 200%, 300%. So thanks.
Councillor Dumont, followed by Vice Mayor Nichols.
Thank you. I'm looking at the full 6 things that we should be considering. The first one, outdoor, to add language that mirrors. I'm fine with that. If it's going to be outdoor seating, it should be included in the indoor seating calculations. For number 2, when we start looking at where alcohol is not served, I am very comfortable with them going up to 50 to 75% if no alcohol is being served, specifically because there aren't many areas in Jack's Beach where a business can actually have an indoor restaurant and get up to a 75% outdoor seating area that reflects their inside without bopping into where number 3 is, the parking requirements. As our code currently sits, I don't want to unfairly advantage businesses that are trying to take up outdoor seating for take up parking to add outdoor seating. So there needs to be a balance between the parking and the seating. And as we work through our LDC, I think we need to be very cautious about a restaurant starting to take up outdoor parking to be able to add outdoor seating. If they have land area available on their lots, I'm perfectly fine with them using that for outdoor seating, but it gets hairy when you start looking at the parking to add seating. That's to remove the parking. I am happy to go between 50 and 75%. I wouldn't go up to the full 100%, even though I know that there are so few establishments that have the outdoor area to be able to accommodate 100% of their indoor area. Still, I think 50 to 75% is more manageable for a transition phase for outdoor seating. Again, I'm fine with that part. The liquor license, if you're going to have outdoor seating, you need to have the height fence. I am more favorable if you have that liquor license. I think this was maybe at the last or the meeting before the last CRA meeting, that if you are a restaurant, you should stop service at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. There was some debate as to 10 to 11. This was for the Home Depot parking lot. When do you, and this is completely out of the CRA, out of the downtown area, when should you stop service if you're serving outdoors, so you're not intruding on the surrounding neighborhood's quality of life? So I would say that, you should stop service by 10 Sunday through Thursday, 11 or 12, Friday to Saturday. And I do like the harder vegetative buffer. It not only helps to alleviate some of the noise, it just makes it more aesthetically pleasing. We all, we've been to places that you're sitting in the middle of a parking lot with a little fence versus you're sitting in a parking lot with greenery on the inside of the fence. And the part that has the greenery on the inside of the fence is more appealing and inviting than just sitting in a parking lot with a little piece of fence and some 2x4s. So I am for the city asking for some kind of a harder vegetative buffer, and I have spoken to businesses who are fighting for these outdoor seating. And this is an easy one for them because they said, yeah, people want to be able to sit in an outdoor environment, being not a parking lot environment, a more outdoorsy, natural environment while patronizing their businesses. And that's my 6.
Vice Mayor Nichols?
Okay, for the percentage, because I'm a fan of small businesses, I would like to consider potentially doing like a sliding scale to where, even if you're a, 400 square foot, you could have up to 100, you could have up to 100%, but the larger you get, the smaller your percentages, or just cap it at like, 600-700 square feet or something for outdoor. There needs to be some limit so we're not having huge outdoor areas. The next one, I think I brought it up before, but if somebody's going to choose to have the outdoor seating increased, that they should they shouldn't be allowed to have both to be open, have the ability to be open after 12 o'clock and have this increased seating, that they should choose one or the other. Because I think the outdoor noise mixed with alcohol after midnight is not a good thing. So I think that those restaurants should choose one or the other. As for parking, I'm less concerned about parking because just for example, at the corner with Neptune Beach and Atlantic Beach, they have a challenge for parking, but people find a way to get there if the restaurants are good and it's quaint, and you get a lot more residents utilizing those areas. So a little less concerned about the parking. So those are my 3 points I wanted to make.
And Vice Mayor Nichols, just to clarify, I think what you had said at a previous meeting was that if a business was taking advantage of the indoor and outdoor seating to get their SRX, then they should be held, to the state requirement of shutting down by midnight, as opposed to getting those 2 extra hours of extension.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. Councilmember Golding, followed by Councillor Jansen.
So I have a question about number 2 and number 3. They both have 150 to 300 square feet. Now, is that intentional to ask us what we want? Do we want it to be 150? Do we want it to be 300? Do we want it to be something in between?
Yes, ma'am. I was really looking for some guidance. So the reason I put this range is 150 square feet is about equivalent to 1 parking space, and 300 square feet is about 2 parking spaces. So I know we have some outdoor seating areas currently that have expanded out into parking spaces in parking lots. And primarily the reason they were able to do that was because there was an excess of parking spaces in those areas. There may not be many excess parking spaces in some of these commercial centers anymore because the restaurants that are there now have already expanded out to the parking lot. So, I could comfortably say we might not get a lot more of those without parking variances. But this was really more of, just to give you kind of some perspective on how large each of these numbers would be, 1 parking space versus 2 parking spaces large, for example. So you might be able to fit 2 small 2-top tables in 1 parking space, whereas if you've got 2, you could do maybe a couple of 4 tops, but still a pretty small area. But really was looking on a little more direction from you guys on that range there.
Well, I definitely think that whatever we do, the tables need to be able to stay in place and not be removed, so we don't have any issues with people just piling into that area, late at night. And I agree that there do need to be some time limits on the outside areas because of the impacts that they would have on potential neighbors, or like residential neighbors, or whoever they're going to be close to. Also, would this include, because I didn't see anything about safety and ADA requirements for these outside areas?
So we would automatically review, just like we do now, any outdoor seating areas that are proposed. We would review them to ensure that ADA access is maintained, and that if alcohol is served, even just currently in our code, there is a required 42-inch tall fence that has to be put around it, which isn't required for non-alcoholic establishments. But certainly something that we could look into adding some as part of maybe the buffering requirements, for example.
Because I'm just thinking about the discussion we just recently had about our resolution that we passed for the temporary outside dining, and we are requiring that there be, some kind of fence or some kind of fence or buffer or whatever. So, and my understanding was that part of the reason for that is for safety, so that, if you do have somebody in an outside area, you don't, I don't know how much it may protect people, but at least you have something that delineates what that area is. And so hopefully you don't have cars or whatever, going into that area where they shouldn't be. I'm with Chet on the percentage. I would support starting with 50%, and then we could increase it. I definitely want to see us have some of those rooftop places where we could have more space, outside dining space. But my concern is the impact of making the space large if it's not on a rooftop. A rooftop to me, is not going to be taking up parking. It's not necessarily going to be impacting a neighboring business, like taking up space that is right next to a neighboring business. So I'd be fine with starting with the 50%. I do like the buffer that you mentioned. And I think I'm fine with the minimum seating to compute the number, or sorry, the seating, allowing the outdoor seating to contribute to the seating required for the COP license. But I do have a question though, for like the smaller areas where we're saying that they wouldn't require a conditional use. For those outside areas, if they don't have to go for conditional use, what can be done if that outside area becomes a problem? Because, at least if you get a conditional use and your outside area becomes problematic, you can revoke the conditional use, right? But if there is no conditional use, then how do we handle outside areas that become problematic?
So I would answer that with our best tool for that would be code enforcement. And then again, obviously, if it's a noise issue, that would be, the police department. And you're hitting on something I think that was discussed back in, I think that ordinance originally was from 2017. And exactly that question was, how would we enforce it? So I think we could as far as regulating how the outdoor seating is set up, if they don't go through the conditional use process, having some type of internal administrative process to review that for safety, security, ADA compliance, et cetera. But then also code enforcement would be able to be active if there was some kind of issue or complaint. And again, the police department as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jansen, followed by Councillor Meza.
Heather, I'll just get to the point of my position on it. I agree with the 300 square feet end of if they have the space eligible for it, if they can expend that amount of space. So I'm in favor for the 2 parking spots again if they have it. And then I also agree with Councilman Stokes on the 50 percentile as a good platform to jump from and build upon if we can. I'd like to see it get more if it's feasible, but let's start at 50% and let's see how that works and then move forward from there.
Councillor Meza.
Is this something our new city attorney is going to be looking into once she gets in?
My guess is she might be doing a legal review of the final language that's drafted.
Okay.
Any other comments from council on this item? If not, Heather, I think you've got some good direction on this one.
I do. Thank you, guys. And just to clarify too, the way our code is written now, when we talk about the 25% ratio of outdoor seating to indoor seating, it's 25% of the gross restaurant area. So it's not just 25% of the seating area. So when you talk about going up to 50% of the entire indoor restaurant area, as we all know, there's a front of the house and a back of the house, you're probably going to get more of an equivalent area of indoor seating to outdoor seating. Even at 50%, your outdoor seating will almost be the same size as the indoor seating area, just to give you some perspective, as opposed to a ratio of the seating area, which is going to be harder for restaurants and staff to calculate. So using that gross total area of a restaurant is going to be a lot easier for everyone when we tell them, what they can have in terms of outdoor seating. So yes, thank you, Mike. I think I do have enough to get started on this. And thankfully our attorney will be on board soon so she can look at what I've put together.
Excellent. Thank you, Heather. Well, that concludes the first 3 items on the agenda, A, B, and C. Before we dive into D, future briefing topics, I did want to ask council if you would be amenable to holding a council briefing on either November 22nd, which is the Monday before Thanksgiving, or November 29th, the Monday after Thanksgiving.
Regarding,
Well, every briefing from here through the end of the year is currently booked with topics. And I've still got a few that I'm trying to get on before the end of the calendar year. And so right now I can't find any room. So I'm either going to have to start bumping some items till after the first of the year, or I've got to see if I can add a council briefing.
Those
I can do the one before Thanksgiving. I can do the one before Thanksgiving, but I can't do the one after.
Before Thanksgiving for me as well would be.
what are the
preferred.
dates?
The
November-
Not that it
22nd.
matters, I have no life. But I'm just looking at my calendar.
November 22nd, which is the Monday before Thanksgiving, or November 29th, the Monday after Thanksgiving.
I'm good for either.
Mike, I think Chris already put the 22nd on our calendars, so you might be good.
Yeah, we already have a briefing.
I have
that
a
day.
briefing on my calendar for the 22nd.
Good. Okay. And just so you're aware, items that will likely be on that council briefing will be the review of the ARPA funding and opportunities for how to spend those funds. We'll also probably review the Beaches Energy Strategic Plan. I'm sorry, not the Beaches Energy Strategic Plan, Gonzalez Park redesign, which is something that you all have been looking at. And we may have another commercial project associated with the Gonzalez Park area that we would also be looking for some council direction for. So those will likely be the 3 items on that meeting. Are there other future briefing topics that council would like to discuss at this time for future placement? Councilmember Jansen, followed by Councillor Golding.
So I would like to, tying into Gonzalez Park and our urban trail plan, maybe consider a feasibility study of the city-owned property at 670 North and Holly to see if we can incorporate that into a park. There'd have to be some water mitigation studies done and what have you, but just maybe as a topic somewhere down the road. Doesn't have to be immediate, but I don't want to lose sight of the grand park plan that we have and not be able to include this as a possibility.
Is there a consensus to place that on a future briefing for discussion of converting property at 6th and Holly to a park?
I have no problem with it. I have no idea what that property, is it for, like, would it be the city purchasing the property?
No, we already own the property. It's basically, it ends up being a water basin for the Pine Grove neighborhood. It's kind of a little sloppy and swampy right now. It used to be houses, but they flooded all the time. So they've removed the homes and we own the property now, the city does. So there'd have to be some water mitigation and some studies done on it to see if it's even possible. But I'd like to.
Sounds wonderful.
My understanding was that the city bought it because of the issues, and I'm kind of concerned that we should not be doing anything with it because it may impact the houses around it. And we may want to just leave it there to be kind of that stormwater retention pond area that it becomes at times.
Well, but yeah, it's not a pond yet. And all I'm asking is to take a look to see if there's something that we can do without affecting the homes around it. I'm one of the homes around it. So obviously I don't want the homes around it being affected, but right now it's just a land mass and there's no design to it whatsoever.
I could see, like, there are some basic things you can do, swings, benches and such that won't impact water drainage, but when we don't need it, it still makes it enjoyable for the people who live around the area. So if that's what you mean by a park, I can see that. If you're looking at a splash pad, I know that's a bad example because it's water and such, but any kind of a concrete pavement, I could see that being more of a issue. But if you're looking at just kind of, oh gosh, you know, a swing or benches and things like that without some kind of a pervious surface, that would be impervious. Oh gosh, concrete surface. I could see that being fine in any of those areas.
I think I've got 1 yay, 1 nay for future topic. There's a second yay. We'll throw something on for after the first of the year to give you a little bit of background on the property, that you all have some idea of why it was acquired and what the issues are associated with it. Councillor Golding.
Thank you, Mike. First of all, speaking of that piece of property, it's a good segue. So when several of us went to the League of Cities conference, there was a guy there, Alec Bogdanoff, who's the Florida director with the American Flood Coalition. And he was talking about the fact that Florida now has a Resilient Florida grant program. And that got me going in the direction of talking to some people with the American Flood Coalition. And I'd like to, so the American Flood Coalition is a nonpartisan coalition. And they basically are working nationally to try to, I guess, increase funding and investments and things like that with regard to flooding and sea level rise and resilience. And they basically you can become a member of the American Flood Coalition, and it doesn't cost anything, but gives us access to their resources. And they definitely are, they're an impressive organization. They did a presentation to Beaches Watch for the September meeting. If anybody would be interested, you could watch the September Beaches Watch video, which is on the beacheswatch.com website. But they would also be willing to talk to us, and maybe she said that Anna, who is the primary contact I've spoken with the most, she said they can do a 5 to 10 minute brief summary about their organization. Atlantic Beach, the city of Atlantic Beach and the city of Neptune Beach are both members of the American Flood Coalition. John Rutherford is also a member of the American Flood Coalition. Mayor Glasser and Mayor Brown are also members of the coalition. So I just feel like it's an opportunity for us to consider a membership as well, because it may be beneficial to us going forward with any of the issues that we are going to try to be addressing with flooding, resiliency, sea level rise. So I'd like to suggest that we maybe invite a representative to one of our briefings so that they can do a 5 or 10 minute introduction about their organization and the benefits of membership. And then that way our council can decide if we would like to join the Flood Coalition. And like I said, it's free, it doesn't cost anything, but I think as a council, we would need to make that decision that we would want to join the Flood Coalition. That's my first item, and I have a second item.
Andy, on that first item, is that something that they would make a presentation, or do they have pre-prepared materials and or videos that we could also get and distribute to council?
They have pre-prepared materials, but they could also do, she said she could also do 5 or 10 minutes, and that would be, you know, and an opportunity for people to ask questions is the value in that, I think.
Anyone have thoughts on adding that as a future briefing topic?
I'm fine with it. It's free. It's 5 minutes. If we get the materials beforehand, we can watch it at our leisure, and then, you know, listen for 5 minutes and ask questions to decide what we want to move forward with. I see that as a 5 minutes of our collective time, and then whatever the time is for the materials that are sent beforehand.
Okay. And Councillor Golding, you sounded like you had a second item.
I do. I don't know. Did everybody receive an email from a Mr. Pauk, P-O-U-K? I brought this up at one of our previous briefings. He's a gentleman that lives on Waterway Island Lane. He and several other residents that live on the marsh side of Waterway Island Lane would like to do some dredging. And the email he sent me sounded like he had sent an email to all the council members. And so you guys haven't seen any email from him?
Is this the same one, Sandy, that's talked to you, both you and I? And yeah, I haven't seen an email, but I did talk to him a while back. I think last time we had this conversation.
Okay.
But I haven't seen an email.
Yeah, he's sent an email with some attachments to try to explain what they would like to do with regard to the dredging. And you know, we talked about it briefly before because, and I believe Mike had said, well, you know, this is something that maybe we want to wait until we've done our strategic planning. And at this point, Mike pointed out that our strategic plan priority 4, goal 2, objective 2, to maintain and improve existing natural assets. You know, is this something that, are we ready to talk about either granting an easement to these residences so that they can, basically what they would need to do is remove marshland to be able to dredge a channel behind their properties so that they can have boat access to the ICW. The property is currently owned, the marsh property is currently owned by the city of Jacks Beach. So for anything to happen, it would have to go through us. And so at this point, I wanted to bring this forward to see if we would be interested in discussing this further in a briefing.
I'm uncomfortable with setting precedent for people to be able to dredge from their property into the intercoastal, because you do it for one, that means that you can do it for all of them along the intercoastal. And then we start getting into affecting the ecology and the water flow and the drainage for the rest of the city. So I personally am uncomfortable with a one-off just because they set precedent.
Well, Mr. Pauk's position is that he doesn't believe that that this would be setting a precedent because they don't feel that there are that many properties in Jacks Beach that would be able to do what they're requesting to do. I don't, that's not something that I've been able to put enough time into myself, but to see if that, if that's true. But again, it's something that we would need to look at further. And as a council, we would need to make that decision that we would want to look at that further. So I'm asking to see if anybody would be interested in taking this further.
Sandy, and if I'm not mistaken, there's also a mosquito control element or something that I remember him talking about that the state or county had interest in the dredging. So I there was some other component.
The little channel that's right there now was apparently a mosquito control channel. But that's all I know.
I would suggest that we wait until our city attorney gets her legs under her when she gets here, and have her look deeper into whether this is going to set a precedent. Because I know I have a lot, everybody on the west side of the island who could make a similar argument that it's just a drainage going to their property and they want water access for their boats and such. So I think we should look at it legally as to whether this would set precedent, and then environmentally as to what the impact of dredging would be on the environment around that area. So it's not a no, it's just like hold off until we get more information.
Would council benefit from me sending to all council members the information that Councillor Golding received, so you can take a look at it? And so that way we can have a more cognizant discussion at a later point as to whether or not it's something you want to have a full conversation on. But I think right now, with speaking about it without any of the details makes it a little difficult to do. So I have a copy of the email that Councillor Golding received that has a couple of pictures, along with a summary that was put together by the requestant, that's Mr. Pauk. I'll send that to you all and you can at least take a look at it. And then we'll bring it up at a future briefing to see if it's a topic that you want to actually add as a formal briefing at that point. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Could we add some kind of an environmental expert in that? So it's not just the property owner who sees a stream, that it's also the St. John's Riverkeeper, UNF has an environmental thing that they look at the property and the flow of water and such, and they provide their expert opinion, just so it's balanced.
If you all got to the point that you wanted to consider what this request is, then at that point in time, we would talk about what types of professionals we would need to bring in. But I think at this point, the question is, do you even want to have formal consideration of his request? And from what I'm hearing, since many of you haven't seen his email or don't know specifically what he's asking for, you can't say whether or not it's something you would consider or you'd want to shut down before it even gets out of the box. So let me send everyone the information to look at. And at one of our next briefings, we'll put a little note to say, did everybody read it? What are your thoughts? And if you do want to schedule it for a full briefing discussion, at that point, we can talk about whether or not we need to have a legal review and or some type of environmental input from neighboring agencies at that point. Does that
Thank
sound
you,
like?
Mike. I appreciate it.
Okay. Were those your two items? And now we go to Councillor Dumont.
Thank you. In light of the fee simple properties that we have had to, well, that by our current LDC we've been approving, and those that are coming in the future, in addition to our strategic plans, priority 1, which is quality of life, goal 2, sustain and improve community character, and a diversity of neighborhoods, objective 1, so priority 1, goal 2, objective 1, update the LDC references to support communities' desired character, intensity, and mixed use. I would propose that we float the idea of possibly putting a moratorium on either townhouses and or fee simple properties, making properties in the future be non-conforming. When I believe it was Neptune Beach, just did this for some of their business properties. And I thought that that was an interesting idea to at least put a moratorium on it, to put a pause, to make sure that the city could stay in control of one aspect. And for us, this goes directly along with our strategic plan. My concern, and the reason why I said townhouses and or fee simple property, is the planning director and I had this conversation, and she's like, well, when we do fee simple, they're townhouses. I'm like, what happens if the townhouses get knocked out and they have to be rebuilt? And the response was, well, we know that they're townhouses. And I pondered that at 3 a.m, as any middle-aged woman does at 3 a.m. And I was pondering it going, but then you possibly have 2 to 6, based off of our code, different property owners who then need to be in agreement to a contract, or the price, the layout, the materials, and all of that stuff. And I just see that as infeasible, to use the that famous movie quote that I can't remember the movie. I don't think that word means what you think it means. Come on, you guys are the movie people.
It's inconceivable for Princess Bride.
Thank you. It's inconceivable that up to 6 property owners are going to agree on all of the same the same aspects that are going to be needed to build 6 individual properties on fee simple homes. And this is if they were to be wiped out. So I would like to look at the legal ramifications of us putting a moratorium on, and this is the part that I'm more than happy to elaborate on discussion, townhouses and or fee simple. I understand townhouses are perfectly fine, but when you start when you have a townhouse under one ownership, you at least have one ownership for rebuilding or remodeling, fixing. When you have townhouses, which can be up to 6, and you do fee simple, you now have 6 individual owners who then have to somehow agree on a reconstruction, a remodeling, or anything like that. So I think it would help if we started thinking further into the future, not just how our neighborhoods are going to look next year, but how they're going to look in 40 years or in 50 years, to make sure that we make decisions now that really are in the best interest of our children and our your children and your grandchildren.
Thoughts from council on that one?
I think it's something that we should have our new city attorney look into. I don't know if needs to be a briefing, but it's a legal question that I think we should ask our new city attorney in a couple of very short weeks.
I'm not seeing a consensus on that one.
I'd just like to note that the longer we wait on this, the less control we have of the development within the city that has a long-term negative impact on neighborhoods in the city. And like I noted, it's priority one, objective one. So these are the two top things that we think are the most important within the city. And we are willing to let this go for at least a year or two, which can have a very negative impact. Short moratorium till we get our hands on how we deal with fee simple properties and townhouses in a lot of these neighborhoods.
Not seeing a consensus.
My next.
You're next, Vice Mayor Nichols, followed by Mayor Hoffman.
All right. I know these two items might take a little while, but I'll do my best to keep them short. First of all, for the city, just thank you very much for keep pushing to get more trees and more trees in that program. I think it's fantastic. Thank you very much. And the second one, I still want to consider, I don't know if it's a briefing topic, but east and west mixed use paths through our neighborhoods to allow people from the other side of Pittman, the other side of Ninth, or to get into our downtown, just like asphalt paving, we have the right of way. I don't know if we just start with one and try to do more after that to tie in to all of our greenways that tie our parks together. But I'd like to see something. I mean, they did it up on Florida and Neptune Beach. I don't think concrete. I like asphalt better, but I'd really like to figure out a way to get one of those moving. Thank you.
Would that not be part of what we're doing with the urban master trail plan, Mike?
That would be.
Okay, so do we need to have a
Thank
briefing
you.
about it, or would it just be something
Nope.
that would come to us with, okay.
No, just get.
Yeah, as an FYI for council, we will probably have a briefing just after the first of the year related to the urban trails plan development with some policy questions that we need to get answered by council. Before
Fantastic. That'll take care of my need. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Mayor Hoffman.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm very glad that we have a robust schedule of briefings because there was a time not too long ago where briefings were haphazard. They kind of popped up as needed. And as you can tell, when a city council is really doing its job, they're needed a lot, and an extra one on Thanksgiving week. So thank you guys all for helping bring up these topics. I would say though, during the council briefings, when we get to the item of future briefing topics, we need to be a little more concise in how we're communicating that. I feel like we're taking this time to advocate on the particular issue when we haven't even decided if it's something the city council wants to bring up. So I would just ask, for the sake of everyone's valuable time, that we come with a little more concise and direct requests when we get to this item on the agenda. That being said, we haven't seen the Gantt chart in a while, and I think that would probably hit on a lot of things to see the updated Gantt chart that you've done, since that's got a lot of the items that we've talked about today and have mentioned even in this item on the agenda. So I think that would be a good thing to, maybe roll it out once a quarter or so. I don't think it'll take up a lot of time on the agenda, but it would be valuable to see.
I apologize. I'll try to be more concise.
I'm still seeing two hands raised, but I don't know if those are legacy hand raises. Vice Mayor Nichols, followed by Councillor Golding.
I'm not showing my hands up. but my screen's frozen, so I'm out.
No, I do have mine up. To the mayor's point, I totally agree. I think it would be helpful for us to have more information when we're talking about future briefing topics. But my question would be, how do we want to do that? Because, should we be sending things to Mike and ask Mike to distribute things to the rest of the city council prior to a briefing where we want to bring this up? Because I certainly could have done that with the American Flood Coalition, but was just hopeful that, with 5 minutes from them, that's not too big of an ask. But I understand the other item I brought up. I honestly thought all the council members had received the email from this gentleman, so I thought we would be talking about something that we all had seen. But would like to know, how would we want to go about doing that so that we can make sure that everybody gets all the information and can discuss it knowledgeably?
Well, I would think at this point, it's just, do we have a consensus? Are there 4 people that agree to put this on a council briefing? So we don't have to have all of the information, but what I feel us doing is trying to solve the problem in this discussion. And that's not what this is for. This is to decide, yes, we're going to take it forward to a briefing. So I think that's when you would decide and work with Mike on distributing the information to us that would be relevant. But I think we just need to figure out how to make a convincing case in a minute and get 3 other people to nod their head to say, yes, this is something that we want at a briefing. And to Chet's point, some things would need to go to legal, some things can stop at staff or talk to staff. And there's plenty of things that are on the agenda for briefings that we don't talk about in this forum. They just go there automatically because they're obviously of full council interest. So I think each issue is gonna be different, Sandy, but I think at this point is you just got to get 3 other heads to nod. So once you get 3 other heads nodding, and if you don't, we move on.
Well, then I'm confused because more than 3 other heads have actually spoken at council meetings regarding townhouses and fee simple properties when we are approving them and how they are detrimental in the long term of our community. Yet nobody moved an inch when I mentioned it. So I'm just confused as to, do I need to read verbatim what they've all stated at the council meetings after I bring up this very important piece for a lot of people who live in the neighborhoods, where at a briefing, it's no longer critical.
Well,
I'm just a little confused.
Well, you mentioned a moratorium on buildings. And I think that was the question. Do you want to bring a moratorium to consider to a council briefing? And that's probably why you didn't see heads nodding, I think. And my point of bringing up the Gantt chart is we need to look at where are we on moving through the projects that we have on there, one of which is the LDC. So I think
I asked Mike, I've been asking about that Gantt chart for months. And there's the LDC, and then there's what we can do before we get to the LDC, because the LDC comes after the comprehensive plan. It's a process. There is a process that we have to go to, but by the time we get to LDC, our neighborhoods could be adversely impacted to a point where changes in the LDC no longer really are applicable to the people who are living in those neighborhoods.
I think it's
And
an
it could
attorney
be me
question.
that I did not, I just think that everybody's thinking that way, but so it's probably my explanation of why I was asking for the moratorium. So I'll put that on me, but there is a process. And yes, we all agree that we need to do the comp plan, we need to do the LDC, but before we can get to the LDC, there's a lot of development going on, or that's being thought of going on, specifically because of the availability of land at the beaches, that really starts hemming us in when it comes to the LDC and the comp plan in the future.
And Georgette, I've agreed with you in council, and like I said, I think it's a legal question that we need to ask an attorney instead of us. None of us are legal people. I think we need to look at legal ramifications before we start talking moratoriums. And so that's my point. I'm not, that's why I said I think this is a great first topic for our new city attorney. And if it's something that we want to put into one of our, using our current attorney pool, then I 100% think we should have Mike have that conversation. But there's just the legal ramifications could be huge. And, let's let an attorney delve in on, okay, this is what we want to do. What's the next best steps? Because none of us are, have JDs. And I think that we should, take these moratoriums, not just throw them around.
I do have to agree with Chet. Councilor Dumont, I agree with you. I think this is the first step, but I also believe this is a legal question. And I think our new city attorney should look into it once she gets on board. That's it for me.
So can we all agree that this is something we want to ask the city attorney to look at when she comes on board? Maybe that's how we move forward with this.
That's kind of what I was asking for. I'm not saying that I'm going to drop the legal stuff. I'm saying we should really look into a moratorium, and we need the legal advice to be able to do so.
I think we need to be very careful about use of the word moratorium, especially without any sort of legal advice. And my whole point was that this is where we bring up topics. We see if there's a consensus for future briefings. I did not mean to bring this issue up again.
Can I throw out a topic for future briefing? Do you all want to have?
It doesn't include a moratorium.
It doesn't include moratorium, but do you all want me to start working with the incoming city attorney on having possibly either briefing time or a special meeting with council and the city attorney, so you can all talk about your priorities? Because right now there's nothing on the calendar between now and the end of the calendar year.
Yes.
Time with city attorney. Got it. Maybe that's the Monday after Thanksgiving. Just kidding. Councilmember Stokes, your hand is still up. Did you have something else, or are you?
My apologies.
No problem. Does anyone have any committee assignment reports they'd like to go through?
Well, I wanted to talk about the League of Cities conference, but not now because it's 7:30. So yeah, I'm gonna say no.
Mayor Hoffman?
Just a really quick update on the downtown business owner meeting. We met at Cup of Job, which is a cute little coffee shop downtown if you haven't been there. And Lori Richards, who you guys met, if you didn't already know, last week from Beam, presented on some of the things that Beam can provide to their employees and to residents and people that are employed and work at the beaches. They also expressed some interest in learning a little more about hurricane preparedness from Beach's energy service and learning more about beach life rentals, because I guess a lot of the bars and the coffee shop in particular get asked about that. So we're going to invite Kurt DeWitt, who you guys are all familiar with his name at least, to come attend one of those. And there is a new restaurant downtown called Goat. If you haven't been there, it's really good. So we've added them to our distribution list to invite to that meeting too. So once they get their feet on the ground, hopefully they will be able to start attending.
Councilor Stokes?
Yeah, I'm going to defer the Blue Zones update till another meeting because it's time. But Chris and Mike were there, and we did have an update, but we'll defer when it's not 7:30.
Okay.
We're all sounding like old people. 7:30 on a Monday. We got to get ready for bed.
I got lasagna waiting on me. I'm ready.
Good night, y'all. I gotta go to yoga.
Well, thank you all for your time this evening. Just a reminder that next Monday we have our second reading of the budget adoption and the millage. That's, I believe, at 5:45, followed by our regular council meeting at 6 o'clock. So look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you and have the rest of the night.
Good night.